Welcome to another live stream. I've been told that my voice sounds different in the morning, so if a lot of targets will kind of trip on that. Maybe they think I'm using some kind of voice generator or something like that. But no, it's just different in the morning. Anyway, it looks like I have a kitty attack here. Anyway, I wanted to come on and talk about waking up and your conceptual framework, because targeted individuals are thrown into a different reality. They are thrown into a world, a nightmare world, where they are being attacked and they are dealing with very intense harassment that seems to be unescapable for some people. And I've mentioned before that sometimes, you're the victim of different forms of gang stalking. Some people are the scapegoat of their community. Some individuals talk about leaving their geographical area, and for the most part, it stops. Other targets will do that, and it might stop for a specific period of time, maybe only for about 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, it seems like the people at your workplace get wind of it. Individuals you're dealing with at convenience stores or other locations are all of a sudden treating you differently. They're staring at you and whispering. You're not looking at them. You don't know what's going on. And these things seem to follow people. Some people believe they are being experimented on. They're hearing voices. They've speculated that some type of technological device has been aimed at them, voice to skull, or other directed energy weapons, and they're trying to figure out ways to silence whistleblowers. Whatever you're dealing with, the point is that your world is going to be different. And I think it was last night, I've mentioned it several times, that you think back as someone who experiences this, and you start to see other things, and you remember maybe something that you just thought was a little off, and you see that it was always there. Okay, that's kind of the point. All these things have always been in your world. The temptation is to look at the world around you, or maybe even have those crescendo moments where it just seems, it's like the people that you tried to tell, it's just not possible that these things could be happening. It's just not. It's not possible. It can't be real, right? 1 minute you're walking around, there seems to be at least a reasonable amount of logic in your world. You're not thinking that people are watching you or whatever, or whispering about you behind closed doors, or scheming or plotting against you to sabotage your life. And then when people start to experience this whole thing, it certainly seems like it. And I've also mentioned that processing the information is very important, because I've been accused before. People will say, what if some of these people are just crazy? It's not all targets are targets. Well, I don't know who is and who isn't. But the thing is there are different things happening to people, and sometimes individuals can be traumatized. And the bigger issue is that now they're looking for these things, and they're playing into that scientific equation of sensitization. And hypothetically, we'll just say that it stopped, right? And you were sensitized, you were like reprogrammed in a way where you're processing information in a personal way. And a lot of targets will do that. And then you realize after, maybe a specific amount of time, 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, that it's real, but a lot of the things you were paranoid about or thinking were just, it was all just the science. You were tripping out because you were sensitized, right? You were processing information differently. And so my rebuttal is, well, if someone has been traumatized, or maybe they are reading into their environment, the key to walking out of that is to process information properly, to be critical of whatever stimuli is coming at you, right? You don't want to just jump to conclusions. It's easy to do. I do it all the time, and I catch myself doing it. You're looking for this stuff, man. You shouldn't be paying attention. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, then you might have that moment where you're just like, wow, this is just too crazy. That's, some people will go into that psychosis at that point to explain, to organize the data, the stimuli that is coming in, which I've talked about before. It's your survival mechanism. Your brain is wired when you experience trauma to make you remember that and to organize it properly within your mind so that it doesn't happen again, right? The only problem is with group harassment, with the mobbing and everything, you can't control other people, right? That's not possible. So you're caught in this, mode of trying to organize this stuff so that you can move on. Your brain is wired that way, but it just keeps happening and keeps happening, and it can take the target into disillusionment. It can take you into a psychosis. Maybe this is just a matrix. Maybe it isn't possible. Maybe I died and I'm in like a nightmare, or I'm in hell or purgatory or whatever. You think about those things, because waking up to this is not easy. And I've talked about before that your conceptual framework, at least some of the people, because I know that there are a lot of targets. So I've been targeted since I was a little kid. I believe that. I do. I believe it. But usually there is a time where it becomes so intense and overt and obvious that your conceptual framework is different. It was there before, but you didn't know, right? You were not really up on what was going on. And now that you are, it's like everybody is taking off the mask. The people you were dealing with, I'm getting attacked by the kitty again. The people you are dealing with are being very obvious. And so the logic is different. Your reality is different. And it can be a shock to the system, right? You deal with it for a while, but then, of course, the passing of time, it just intensifies that whole thing. Boy, you are sure shedding. I'm going to start brushing you. And you will find yourself in those moments. And I've also mentioned that, in fact, a lot of targets will talk about being gang stalked in many different locations where, maybe even involving things that are happening to them in church, which that's very unfortunate. But there is an exponential takeover of this world through the legal framework system, which I've mentioned before, in the spiritual dimension, right? And so if you're going to follow the biblical criteria, there has been an invasion, right, through usually things involving morality and spiritual laws. And I've talked about the secret societies before. I've talked about how, some of the elites or whatever have really gone over to the other side. And as a result of that, not only has mankind experienced a type of corporate judgment, but I think the geographical territory around these leaders and around people, not necessarily in a total way, but what happens is it affects everyone. Some of the oaths it's very similar to witchcraft, maybe in certain groups. I'm not going to mention it. I've gotten some bad attention for that, but you know who they are. And I've mentioned them before. And the thing is you have that exponential takeover, and of course the environment is going to change. And things are going to change in our society. A lot of people talk about that. I remember the good old days or whatever, right? And now everybody's just in their own world on their phone. And that trips out targets too, because they think that they're looking at stuff that has to do with them, or they're communicating about them. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm around people that their phones are out no matter what. And I know they're not taught. They don't even notice me. But they're on their phone. And it might happen, it might look like it. I might walk in the room and everybody just picks up their phone. It's not about me, though. You got to be real careful how you process that information. And like I said, if someone was reading into it, the walking out part is the processing information, knowing the truth about these things, knowing the truth about where you are, and the truth about your conceptual framework can prevent that psychosis, that disillusionment. But even when you deal with religious doctrine, as I mentioned, in the churches, there's also an exponential takeover there. You have what Paul described in Acts 20 is that wolves are going to come in and they're not going to spare the flock. And that was right after he was going to leave. So that's a long time ago, right? I think he died around 65 AD. So do the math. That's a long time. And then we have a lot of these institutions and a lot of these demonic doctrines and so on and so forth. And you have regulation and dysregulation methodology where it seems as though, some of these spirits are giving people like a false sense of security or peace around these teachers, these gurus, these false teachers, these wolves. And they, rather than looking at the biblical truth, will start to believe them and to be married to these doctrines because it feels good and they're designed that way. You're one of the elect of the universe, or you're going to be a god someday, or whatever it is, or you're going to be rich. God wants you to have billions of dollars, but it feeds into the delusion, and that disillusionment can happen in a way where you get dysregulated, right? You're falling for the lies of that false teacher, and you're tithing ridiculous amounts of money, thinking that God is obligated to save your mortgage or something because you're giving money to this guy, and then you find out that it's just not biblical, and then you're tempted with that framework that's already set up just to believe that maybe Christianity is false, and then people deconstruct when really they were waking up. They were waking up to reality, and they needed to move on to the next stage. They needed to move on to the place where they realize they're deconstructing from a lie. They're deconstructing from a false teacher, from a false version of the faith, and so on and so forth. And so the conceptual framework, of course, is very important. And like I said, for targets, you have individuals that are experiencing different environmental tyranny, different environmental stimuli. And of course, that can cause division. But if you process the information properly and realize that it was always there, and realize that, rather than to think that you're being driven crazy, because it really, that's the temptation. And not only that, everybody around the target is dealing with a different dispensation of reality or stimuli because they're not the victim of a group harassment campaign. And so they think you're crazy. You start wondering if you're nuts, and they love it because that's what they want to do, right? And then, you take it into the complex increments that it is designed. You have people who they become very subtle with their techniques. Why? They don't have to do that weird stuff anymore because the target already knows. You're already awake to those things. You've been sensitized to them, unfortunately. And it's like they can communicate with targets, with plausible deniability. And like I said, you have to be very strict when it comes to the criteria of processing that information. And, if you're not sure, if it's not ridiculously over the top, you shouldn't be paying attention to it. That's really the only thing you can do. That's the best strategy I can tell you. Rather than, grabbing your phone. And it's okay to do that because sometimes it's like people will get caught. So, but, be careful with that. Because, the last thing you want to do is to, fulfill the criteria of all the bystanders who don't have any idea what's going on. And then all targets look like a bunch of nuts running around filming people who are living their regular everyday lives. And we're in this persecutory delusion of insanity. Right. And in fact, I watched a video like that last night, and it was an hour-long breakdown of these crazy people who think they're targeted individuals. And sometimes you wonder if some of these people out here, who are acting as if they are targeted individuals are really not. Right? They're just here to make us look crazy. And then real targets will be watching the video going, that ain't gang stalking. Those people they're looking at you because you're running around acting weird. And so now, that's the whole issue of gaining credibility. If people want to have awareness, that's certainly not how to do it. I don't know if that's even realistic. I'm going to go into the comments. And, oh, Chris, how's it going? Chris Steger, welcome to the live stream. Yeah, it's been a while. And new one. Okay, welcome to the live stream. Can't believe that's all we've got in here. Looks like everybody was awake. Probably a little too late last night. I know I woke up, and sometimes I'll do that for a couple hours and just, I don't know, stare at the security cameras and think about the day ahead and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. It's interesting to see that there's a lot of animals that come through here at night where I am. Everything from deer to, the stray cat. A lot of rabbits running around out there. Interesting stuff. Of course, you don't have to worry about them. Anybody have anything to add to the comments out here? Big Dog, Corn Dog. Welcome to the live stream. I'm just reading this. Okay. And Chris says he's doing well. Things are going well. Well, that's good. That's great. Because it's, I've mentioned before that there are times of refreshing for the targeted individual, and they want you to be afraid to enjoy yourself or relax. And that's great that Chris is not afraid to be positive. They literally want you to be skeptical of being positive. They want you in a negative state of mind and just thinking everything is completely gone and over, and you've missed out on everything. It's not true. And Chris is doing well, and I'm glad that he's on the path to brighter and better things. And even if you're dealing with a lot of harassment and intense stalking, you can still say that too about your life. It's not easy to do, but you have to realize that now that you're awake to these things, there's growth. It hurts. The facades that we all have, the egoic death that can happen, it can be a positive thing, because you're waking up and you're breaking off the scales off your eyes. You are shaking off those little paper mache masks and that pseudo identity that fits into everybody else's little cookie cutter desire for what you are in their life, right? And for targets, you become a pincushion. You're the vessel of wrath. You're everybody's, whatever, scapegoat. And that's not going to work. And you're forced to break away. You're forced to deal with that as they try to basically commandeer your survival mechanisms. You're breaking out of that shell, the butterfly that is breaking out of that cocoon, and it's a painful thing. And it's one of the things that a lot of targets will talk about is just how they realize how fickle their relationships really were. They, in their mind, they would assume these people would die for them. Some their family. Some of the targets out there dealing with harassment of their family. And it's just evil to see, and it's kind of depressing at first to see how easy these people will turn against you, and they'll join together like a pack, because it's almost like you're that wounded animal, right? And now it's some animal packs don't do that. They'll take care of the old ones or the sick ones. They'll even bring them food. Strangely enough, wolves are like that. They will actually feed the elders. I think lions are like that too. Other animals, they might not. And they turn against that one. And it's just, people seem to be like that for some reason. It's depressing at first, but you need to wake up and realize, the reality behind that. And like I said, unfortunately, at first, it's very painful. A lot of targets will be dealing with, the family thing, and it's kind of surreal, because I've mentioned that when you get into the trauma invasion, you are looking at a type of injection into the mind of the victim through trauma, where they are forming memories that are amalgamated together through a type of framework of associations. And the problem with that is that it creates a trigger mechanism that is exponential. And so one thing leads to another. In other words, a song on the radio, doesn't matter what it is, on the very day that you might have experienced some very traumatic stuff, maybe even gang stalking, might be with your family member, and then of course, then what? Well, now all the things around that they're gonna remind you of something very negative, something very traumatic. And when it comes to that family member, I think it's designed that way. I think that the kingdom of darkness is, they know to do that. It's more of that legal framework, because it's a greater transgression to turn against your own, to make it an issue of blood. It's literally within the framework. There's people that speculate that some of these things involved in the secret societies or the cults, they involve that type of thing where people become a type of scapegoat, a victim of menticide, where they are driven crazy and discredited, and they're just, all the wrath is poured out on them, and the rest of the family members can like just escape that persecution from the spirits or something. I don't know, but you have a lot of different things going on. I talked to a guy by the name of Gary Wayne, and he mentioned that sometimes it's just a way to appease their gods. And he was referring to the individuals in the secret societies, that their prosperity and some of the things that they get out of, along with conforming, is just to do something just horrific, maybe even to a family member. And that typically there are those things going on behind closed doors. I don't know. I'm not trying to feed into anyone's persecutory delusion, but there's a reason why these people do this stuff. But unfortunately, when it comes to a family member, those memories and that trigger mechanism that I, of course, told you was exponential, because those memories go all the way back into your childhood now, because that person is there. It's like a mental virus that was pre-planned, and now they use someone who you care about, or that you love, or that you thought loved you, or whatever, and then now it's just there's no getting away from it. If anything reminds you of that person, it's going to remind you of the trauma now, because that person is connected to that. That's the family member that is stalking me. They have sabotaged me. I thought that they love me. They don't. Maybe they're working, for the government, or all these ridiculous theories. You don't know, for whatever it is. And I think most of the time it's just people being manipulated spiritually, but whatever, because, and I've talked about that, a lot of people will assume that everybody has got inside information to what they're dealing with. Not necessarily. People can be manipulated with that regulation and dysregulation methodology, which can be technological. I've mentioned that before. I think I was talking to a guy out in Nevada, and it's like, in certain areas, people have noticed this, that everybody will just be dysregulated all at once. It's like the whole city is just pissed off. Everybody's honking at each other. It's not just a target. It's not like they're all just coming after this. Like everybody is just in a state of discontent and disarray. And the traffic is crazy. Nobody's holding the door open for anybody at the grocery store. They're all in a bad mood. The cashier throws change back at you. Just get the hell out of here. And it seems like everybody's in bed. You could assume, or I guess you could hypothesize that maybe there are experiments where different frequencies and things can be used to dysregulate people like that. I don't know. I've heard of those things. There was a place in Seattle supposedly that was like that. And they were blanketing that area with different frequencies and stuff, and who knows? And now we got all this 5G, and people are speculating as to what that's doing to us. Who knows? When you look at everybody, they're different. It's like I said, the good old days are gone. Is it because we all used to watch Seinfeld at the end of the day, or is there something else going on? Are we that disconnected just on a platform of information, for the sake of a type of surveillance of individuals, putting the combination of a laptop and a television in their pocket, where they can just basically create a map of their mind? I don't know. But the thing is that exponentially those associations will form, and the correlation of negative energy around the targeted individual can be done through that correlation effect. I've made videos about that, where you might go into a particular location, and I've seen it happen to other people. It's not always just the target. And something starts agitating everybody, and it's not because of the person. They're not really doing anything, but the people are going to think that eventually they're going to connect it. That's the whole point, is that stimuli and the negative abrasive stuff, along with the presence of that individual, are going to create a proposition in the mind of people. And if you mix in some lies or some disinformation with it, that person's a drug dealer, or that person's got bad mojo, bad juju. I've had that happen where people, I used to do delivery even way back when this whole thing started 32, 33 years ago, the overt stuff. And I would go on certain deliveries, and don't come in the house, it's following you. And I'm like, what the hell? This is crazy. Don't let him come in. We don't want it to get in here. You're marked. Literally, people would tell me I was marked and all this weird stuff. And then who's going to believe anything like that? You don't even dare say it. And here I am talking about those things. That was a long time ago. But the weird things that can happen to targets, like I said, it can create that exponential framework. And the conceptual framework is so different that it can take them into disillusionment and psychosis. And you have to learn how to wake up to these things. Okay. We don't have a whole lot of activity in the comment section here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 33. Well, the overt stuff started in 93. It was, there was things going on before that, but it wasn't, it wasn't really, there were some break-ins. Nothing really happened, though. I thought it was just people that came over to see me, and because I used to leave my doors open, man, And I remember one day I came back and there was a knife stuck through the door, a steak knife. And it wasn't a very, it wasn't a solid door, obviously. It was one of those, doors that the slumlord put on there, but it was probably made more for a bedroom door of a trailer or something. This one knife stuck right through it. But the door was open and everything. I went in there, and there was a note on my table. We were here, but you weren't, or something like that. And I'm like, who the hell did that, But I didn't think anything about stalking or anything. And then other things would happen. People would have these weird conversations. I talk about the foreplay. Well, later we're going to drive you nuts. Later when we're doing this other stuff to you, and then, and then they'll just kind of walk away mumbling. And you're like, what the hell are you on? You just think they're crazy or something, or they're losing it, or they need a nap or a Snickers bar or whatever. I don't know what the hell their problem is with. But then later it gets crazy, and it, and then it's the game is on. And for the challenge, if you're a new targeted individual, is to realize that this stuff is serious. Don't freak out, but don't underestimate it. You assume it's going to be over. People are going to get tired of it or whatever, but it just keeps going, depending on who you are. And yeah, It's interesting, and that's the worst part about that waking up is that sometimes it takes 15 years because I didn't know what to think. I mean, who are these people? You're like, what the hell? Who are these individuals, man? Right? Why are they so hell bent to, come after you? And it's beyond anything. And of course, then you realize that there are different things playing into this. Spiritual things are going on. There could even be, things involved in addiction, where people that become involved in this little campaign against you, they might just get addicted to doing it. They've found their therapy where they can puke all their negative energy on you, and somehow that's okay. You get into the social dynamics of a family, and you get a scapegoat there, right? You get the black sheep of the family, and it's everything is their fault, no matter what. Right. And it's okay to torture them and gaslight them or whatever, or, just basically blame them for the rain or the bad weather. It doesn't matter. It's their fault. And, we get a vent on you. It's like channeling energy. You get nervous energy. And the CIA will use that too. And their methodology of interrogation. It's questions and silence, but of course they want a type of social appropriation to take place first, where that individual has to kind of try to, I don't know, vindicate themselves. They have to prove themselves, right? It's the tension that's created around the gang stalking is beyond anything. And it's a type of manufactured psychological environmental control, manufactured schizophrenia, to where, like I said, it might be 5 to 15 years before you wake up and figure out what's really going on, unless you run into these videos. That's kind of one of the reasons why I do this. I'm certainly not getting anything out of it, because I'm getting negative attention for these things, and I appreciate people who support the channel and everything, and that helps me out there. But I've gotten a lot of negative attention for this. I really have, and for most of the people out there, they just think you're crazy, right? And that's not something that you want. It's something that I wonder, and I do. I second guess myself. Maybe I never should have done these things. But for the benefit of the individuals out there, for them, they could figure quite a bit out from watching videos that might take them 5 to 15 years. It might only take them 5 weeks. It might take them 5 days if they binge watch this stuff. It's like, okay, I see what's going on now. I know what I'm up against. I'm not going to, go through this menagerie of psychological manipulation and mind control the way they want me to. They're not going to mess with my head. And they want ignorance. They want people to be susceptible to their delusions. And they want them running around thinking all kinds of weird things and trying to burn down Freemason lodges and everything. They might not even know you. And it's because to them, the resources and the magnitude of their environmental tyranny could only be explained by a group of people, a cabal that has gotten together and marked them. And sometimes it works that way, but not usually in the way that you think. And really, you're instead of buying a bunch of guns and peeking out your windows like all of us did in the beginning, running outside with a pickaxe or something. Why do you win? Because you think it's them, and your neighbors are like, "Man, you're losing it, dude." And you see a cat, that knocked over something in the alley, and there you are running around with a pickaxe. It's just, you don't want to play their game, man. You don't want to do it. And so, for the sake of individuals out there, like I said, who need that information to kind of know what's going on and to I don't know, buffer that stimuli in this process of waking up to where you really are. That it's necessary, and it's something that's actually kind of fun for me, because I know that I'm making it very difficult for the individuals who want to mess with the heads of targets out there and get them to believe all this crazy stuff, right? And unfortunately, they want you to get aggressive. They want you to become dysregulated in a way where you're dysfunctional. And they also want you to get depressed, and they want you to believe the lie. These people are going to get away with this stuff. They're not. I mean, they might get away with it for years, decades, or whatever, but eventually it's going to get taken care of. And a lot of targets will talk about that, and you try to turn this into a positive scenario any way that you can. And some of the disinformation out there is similar, because it'll give you affirmation. It might involve V2K or something like that, where somebody's talking about it, but then they'll start telling you to do crazy stuff. I don't think targets need to detox all the time, shave their heads, and use stun guns on their body. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it's healthy. And I think that maybe these individuals are trying to help. I don't know. When people promote lawsuits, and it's like targets, they like that. Because it's something that I'm looking forward to, and you're not about solutions. And I don't, when I wake up in the morning, it gives me hope. It's like, okay, I mean, fine. I mean, some of these people could get caught, and there's nothing wrong with hoping for that. But when people are getting victimized by this, and it's more of an equation of disillusionment, because you think there's going to be a lawsuit, and you're communicating with these individuals, but really they're just fishing for your information. They're part of the stalking. That's all. It's unfortunate, but that is the reality behind the targeted individual community now. It's a frightening place now. The people that are stalking are pretending to be targets, and some of the individuals out there who have channels, I wonder if it's a psyop sometimes. I was like, this is kind of scary. I don't know. I'm not going to make any accusations, but it's just, at the very least, you got some disinformation. That's not good, because it hurts the victims, right? Well, guys, it's been real. I thought I'd come on and talk about that. And I get ready to go to work. Been working 7 days a week, I think, since March, except when I had to repair my vehicle. And I'm thankful to God that I could do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of targets out there, they get to the place where it just doesn't seem like anything matters, and they want you to kind of give up. And it's hard to keep, it's hard to keep going in the process of this waking up after the complete annihilation of your conceptual framework. It's difficult, and sometimes depression and anxiety can cripple people. And sometimes it really comes in on me. And I'm, like I said, I'm just thankful to the Lord that I'm able to do those things. And it's important to remember the spiritual connection in this gang stalking, in the sense that it's very evil. And even when it comes to some of the logistics that people are trying to figure out in their scenario, sometimes there are spiritual entities involved. And you have to remember that, and people are being manipulated. And eventually, there's going to be a judgment, and that's going to involve the complete 100% truth of your scenario. And that's something that you can look forward to, in the sense that all the people who think you're crazy now, or may have doubted the phenomena and the oppression of this gang stalking reality that you've been exposed to, they're going to know it's true. They can say whatever they want. And I've mentioned that before concerning several things that, well, we disagree now. We'll see what happens later. Put it to bed. Some targets get baited into that, where they get minimized by maybe a perp or someone who just maybe is just honest and being skeptical of their scenario. And it's like, okay, maybe you're right. And you just drop it, rather, because they want to trigger you. They want you to know it's real. You don't understand. You blah, blah. Well, just calm down. It's like, yeah, maybe you're right. And because if they want to trigger you, they'll keep hounding you about it. Why would they keep doing it? If you agree with them and say, yeah, maybe I had to rethink that, and then but they keep bringing it up. Well, you know something going on there, don't you? Be as wise as a serpent, as innocent as a dove. Don't become too civilized, because these people that are messing with you are certainly not. And be careful of the switch in that framework. You start forgetting what's going on. If you can have a refreshing time, but just remember that they want you to play that game where you think you're out of the woods, and that could happen technically, but you don't want to get too excited about anything, because you're enjoying your life within the bounds of your reality in a realistic sense, where that conceptual framework now has been, arranged in a way that clearly shows where you are and what you can expect. And you're sober and you're even about things, and you're enjoying life with a realistic expectation, rather than giving them that control over your emotions because of their environmental tyranny. Everything's going to be okay, whether they decide to stalk you or not. And remember that you're not an aggressor. And that puts you way up above them within the framework, that legal framework, because, like I said, there are spiritual and legal laws involved in your existence. Okay, you're supposed to treat others as you would have them treat you, right? Love your neighbor as yourself, and these things are illegal. Don't ever forget that. They will try to gaslight the target into believing it's justified or whatever. You don't have to believe that, right? And why do they have to hide all this stuff? Why do they have to play little games, right? But they have to try to convince you that, or maybe you try to convince you that they're trying to help you. Of course, no, they're not. But the Lord can work these things out for your benefit. And I'd like to thank everyone who's come in here. I'd like to thank everybody who's going to watch this. And I'd like to thank everyone who helps support me in the channel. The link is in the description. God bless. Be to yourselves. Be safe.